I'm Mark Sponsler, and welcome to the Stormsurf Video Surf Forecast for the week starting Sunday, March 6th.
Stormsurf, waves, weather, buoys, altimetry, snow, temperatures, El Niño, weather analysis, essential data for outdoor people, all the time, no hype.
If you like this video, give us a thumbs up. If you haven't subscribed, please subscribe. If you have any questions, and there's a lot of deep technical data here, just write it in the comments section. We'll be happy to reply, explain, and sometimes we get some pretty good conversations going on in here. All right, let's get to work. Looking at significant wave heights for the North Pacific Ocean, we see remnants of a gale producing 22-foot seas aimed north and not really doing a whole lot. We see remnants of yet another gale circulating somewhere over the North Dateline region, really doing nothing. And then there's yet another system trying to get organized while pushing off Japan. This is the one that we have our eyes on for the immediate future. Let's get into the details. As usual, we start by looking at jet stream level winds. These winds up about 30,000 feet help support the formation of gales, and when they form, help direct their track. We're looking for a trough, a dip in the jet, just like right there, and sort of just like right there. What that helps do is create a counterclockwise flow aloft, a circulation, an eddy in like the river. Think of the jet stream like a river, an eddy. Counterclockwise flow aloft and down at the ocean surface. That's the hallmark of low pressure. And of course, low pressure, if it's strong enough, generates winds. Winds, if they're strong enough, as they get in contact with the ocean surface, create seas. Seas, if they're high enough, as they radiate away from the fetch area, turn into swell. Swell, when it hits your beach, turns into surf. Right, so we have two areas of interest. Right here over the Kuril Islands, that's these little chain of islands here. Japan's right there. And then in the northwestern Gulf, we'll say. This is as of right now. As we get into Monday, the trough in the northwestern Gulf pretty much pinches off. It really makes it difficult to get a circulation going, but it's broader and wider here over off the Kuril Islands. And notice winds are a lot stronger, almost pushing to 190 knots. That'll really get the circulation moving. Tuesday, pretty much the same, but the trough starts pinching off. Notice the jet stream splitting significantly, just a complete break in the jet. And typically, when you get this split jet stream flow, you get high pressure in between. That is pretty much what we've been seeing a lot of in California lately, also due to the split jet stream flow. So we get into Wednesday, more of the same. The trough pretty much fades out here, and there's just nothing. And notice winds actually kind of drop off a bit coming off Japan. Same thing into Thursday. I mean, now we notice this as we get into Friday. The split kind of heals. It gets pushed. Well, Hawaii's there, so it's to 150 west, even east of Hawaii. That kind of is interesting. And then as we get into almost Saturday, the jet looks like it's almost consolidated, pushing across the Pacific, but you see it's splitting off down here, and it's splitting yet again here, and then you see it starting to split here, and you notice that's all because wind speeds are really, 90 to 100 knots here, and, well, about 120 knots here, but it really takes like 140 knots and above to really hold the jet together. Then as we get into Sunday, a week out, the jet is effectively split, though not a giant difference between it, but it looks like it's trying to unravel over Japan. The last little bits of energy holding it together. Look at this. It almost looks like it's consolidated, pushing into Northern California next Sunday, if you believe that. And that, if it happens, would be the first time this entire winter the jet has actually been consolidated enough of way of the cross Pacific to actually make it into the U.S. West Coast in one piece. But we don't have high hopes of that really happening. And then a week out, Sunday night, well, energy just getting weaker and weaker in the jet stream. The last little bit of what we'll call the winter jet pushing into the Pacific Northwest, and that's probably it for the season. Next up, surface level pressure, surface level winds. As we noticed, low pressure is trying to organize off Japan, winds 35 to almost 40 knots. So maybe they're getting a little traction on the ocean surface. But also notice high pressure, 1036 millibar high, right off California, U.S. West Coast, making north winds. Kind of a dead zone, an an ambiguous area, not low pressure, not high pressure, just sort of something in the middle in between. As we get into Monday night, winds build in the low to 40 knots, getting some traction on the ocean surface. High pressure holds off in the east. And then as we get into Tuesday, the low starts lifting north. We notice the jet was kind of pushing that way. Again, same deal in the east. Wednesday, the low fading even more, and high pressure weakening a little bit off the U.S. West Coast. Some sort of low pressure trying to push into this, but just disappearing. Again, another batch trying behind. No, look at this. High pressure trying to set up over Japan as we get into Thursday. And then Friday, finally something tries to organize on the date line with 30-knot winds, building to 35 to almost 40 knots Friday night into Saturday morning, pushing over the date line, and then maybe 45-knot winds Saturday night. Almost kind of looks like a semi-decent pattern. We know the jet stream isn't really supporting anything, but hey, we'll take whatever we can get. And into Sunday night, the low continues towards California, and another one over the North Dateline region. So maybe things aren't as bad as it looks like from the upper level charts. All right, significant wave heights, but we're going back to Monday, the 28th of February. And we're looking right in this region because a low pressure system developed over the northern dateline region with 20, 22, 24, almost 26-foot seas, building to about 27 feet, 26.8 feet right there, okay? And then fading from there. The point being, swell from this system is starting to impact California here on Sunday. It's already hit Hawaii 2 days earlier and is fading. I think there's still some head high, a little bit overhead surf in the north shore of Oahu. Swell is hitting California, but it's buried in a lot of wind chop. But maybe if you can find some select protected break, you can get some of that surf even into Monday. Another system was right behind it, but tracking pretty far to the northeast. Really no swell expected from that. Then on Friday, yet another tiny system developed over the North Dateline region. Maybe some tiny little swell to result, but again, it's really a function of what the winds are doing along the California coast as to whether any swell will be rideable or even noticeable from the two later systems. So that gets us to today. Looking forward, what's the effect of the winds on the ocean surface? Well, we know there's low pressure building off Japan, generating as we get into Monday, well, even we'll go back to Sunday. There we are. No real seas, but by Monday morning, maybe 27-foot seas building. And then in the evening, again, about 26, 27-foot seas. Maybe to briefly 28 feet late Monday evening. And then as we get into Tuesday, again, like 26, 27-foot seas, fading from there over the North Dateline region. By Wednesday, this system is all but gone. We look further out. We know there's another little system, but not till Saturday. 27-foot seas forecast pushing over the dateline with almost 30-foot seas, 31-foot seas north of Hawaii, pushing towards California. If this happens, that would be good. That definitely would generate surf. But again, it's almost a week out. Seems like a bit of a reach given what we've looked at in the jet stream charts and everything else, but we'll keep our eye on it. Looking at winds for the northeast Pacific, we're really looking at California and Hawaii, sort of a southeast light trade wind flow for the Hawaiian Islands today. California, north winds, 15 to 20 knots, exposed breaks. Pretty much that's the name of the game with high pressure in control here. Clockwise circulation around the high, integrating or getting sort of squeezed as it passes by Northern California, generating a little bit more wind. Winds for the Hawaiian Islands on Monday, still pretty light situation, not too bad. You notice this low here. Wonder if north winds are going to be impacting Oahu maybe Monday night. Not too strong, but still. North wind regime continues for California, and yet more on Tuesday. A little bit protected south of Point Arena, but still. Trades for the Hawaiian Islands. As we get into Wednesday, trades. Another wind machine sets up for California, 20-25 knot winds off the coast. Holding, building near shore. On Thursday, more of the same. Trades for the Hawaiian Islands. Friday, a lighter wind regime finally, with trades for the Hawaiian Islands. And then on Saturday, low pressure potentially impacting the Pacific Northwest, but high pressure ridging into California, a relatively light wind regime, trades for the Hawaiian Islands. And then we get into Sunday, the front pushing dangerously close to San Francisco, Northern California, probably a south wind washout, and low pressure north of the Hawaiian Islands, but trades in control. Sunday afternoon into, well, almost Monday. It looks like south winds making it down to south of Monterey Bay there. So by Sunday evening, assuming one believes the models, California will be maybe in a south wind regime. And east-northeast trades for the Hawaiian Islands. But this sort of smells like, let's just go back a little bit, somewhere right in there. It sort of looks like maybe, just maybe, there's a hope for precipitation. Let's go take a look. All right, precipitation models. We're just looking at California. High pressure, you can see it plain as day, just 1038 millibars, just locking down everything. You know, the systems ride up over the high and then fall down inland, that backdoor front scenario we've talked about. Nothing for California, no snow for the Sierra. We're just blasting through. And then we get into Sunday, and there, theoretically, is a cold front reaching down to San Francisco with snow starting to fall in the Tahoe area Sunday during the day. This is a week from now. Do we believe it? No. But at least it's a little tease. And then maybe a little bit more beyond that. Hard to say. But at least there's a tease on the models. Let's go take a look at the snow forecast. Here we go. Olympic Valley. Sure enough, what is that? Maybe we can just pop this right up here. 6.3 inches. All right. Well, that's something. Maybe, if you believe it. Snow levels, well, they're pretty low right now, down around 3,000 feet. But then pretty beyond that, 7,000 feet to about 9,000 feet. This is the freezing level, and then just dipping down below the base of Squaw or Olympic Valley. So maybe a little bit of snow in there, and then right back warming up. Certainly is starting to look like springtime conditions. Let's go check a couple other resorts. Sugar Bowl, about the same thing, maybe 7 inches, just eyeballing it there. Kirkwood, because it's South Lake, not North Lake, and the front is falling north to south, maybe 4 inches, 4.5 inches. And the situation's even worse at Mammoth, maybe an inch or so. A dusting. Dust on crust, if nothing else. All right, let's go take a look long term. What's going on with the Madden Julian Oscillation and the El Niño La Niña Southern Oscillation? As usual, we start by looking at winds across the Pacific on the equator. This is data from the TAA buoy array, series of buoys strung across the equator used for monitoring El Nino, but they have wind sensors on the buoys, and these are not hourly winds. These are 5-day average winds. This is the East Pacific here, West Pacific here. There's the equator right there. We're looking at the arrows. Arrows out of the east indicate pretty strong easterly winds, strong trade. Same thing over the Central Pacific. And that's New Guinea there. Same thing pretty much in the West Pacific. We call it the Kelvin wave generation area. There's the date line. Kelvin wave generation area from about 5 north to 5 south, from 135 east to 170 west, right there. When the active, so there's 2 phases to the MJO, the active phase and the inactive phase. When the active phase moves over the Pacific, it's effectively a low pressure system. That low pressure system can actually reduce or dampen trade winds. It creates precipitation, and those reversal of trade winds can take warm water that's normally here, start pushing it off to the east, not on the surface, but right underneath the equator, down about 150 meters, about 450 feet. That ball of warm water will travel the whole way across the Pacific, then eventually erupt off of Ecuador as it impacts the coast there, pushing the warm water up to the ocean surface. That will in turn start warming ocean surface waters here. If you get consecutive strong enough Kelvin waves, then you get warming here, and that in turn can help kick off El Nino. Likewise, the inactive phase of the MJO, the evil cousin to the active phase, is high pressure, and all it does is enhance trades, eliminate odds for precipitation, and does not impart energy to the jet stream, and therefore doesn't feed the storm track, and so is not favorable for surf or storm production. All right, but it's not the actual winds, it's the anomalies, differences from normal for this time of year. Yeah, the winds are pretty strong out of the east and the East Pacific, but not really stronger than normal. See the arrows? They're barely moving, pointing out of the east, so weakly stronger than normal. Over the Central Pacific, though, moderately stronger than normal. In the Kelvin wave generation area, about the same as here. Pretty strong, stronger than normal for sure. So no clear sign of the active phase of the MJO here. And again, we want the active phase of the MJO because that imparts energy to the jet stream. When you have a more energetic jet, it doesn't split. Remember the charts we looked at a little bit ago? And if the jet is not splitting but is consolidated, that's when it's most likely to form troughs. And troughs, of course, create storms, but you need wind in the jet to create those storms, and the storms, of course, generate waves. So it's the active phase of the MJO. The active phase is like a sort of like a mini El Nino, and of course everyone knows the El Nino is great for surf and weather production, if it's strong enough, if anything, a little bit too much. But we're looking for the signs of the active phase of the MJO and westerly anomalies associated with it. All right, so zonal wind anomalies. This is past performance. Whole planet on one chart. The date line runs right up the middle. Far West Pacific starts at about 135 east, so right up there. California is about 120 west, but the Kelvin wave generation area ends about 170 west. So it's just this area right in here we're looking at. And you can go the whole way up the chart. The yellows and reds are westerly anomalies. The blues are easterly anomalies. So this is like the active phase of the MJO. Notice it doesn't even make it into the Pacific. We've had nothing but easterly anomalies over the date line since almost the beginning of February. This would be the inactive phase of the MJO. The forecast for the next 7 days, you can see it. Doesn't take a whole lot to realize a lot more easterly anomalies are forecast. Now notice, the active phase of the MJO, it looks like trying to make its way into the Pacific here today, literally, but then it gets rebuffed and just backtracks, and that's the end of it. All right, let's dig a little deeper. Outgoing long-wave radiation forecasts. All right, we said the active phase of the MJO is like a low-pressure system. It generates clouds and winds, right? The inactive phase is like a high-pressure system. No clouds, clear air. So all this chart does is trying to tell us, is there a cloudiness or not cloudiness? It's the whole planet, 4 different panels: South America, Central America, Hawaii, New Guinea, equator right there, and 180, that's the date line. So the Kelvin wave generation area is right there. A little bit of yellow means more sunlight reflectivity, so inactive phase of the MJO. And this is the statistic model. And you go down and you look for the next 15 days, that's 5 days out, 10 days out, 15 days out, so 2 weeks. Basically, neither the active nor the inactive phase, according to this chart. The dynamic model suggests no inactive phase building, more sunlight reflectivity, while the active phase builds over the maritime continent. So the two models, one, the statistic model just saying a dead neutral pattern, where the dynamic model suggests no, inactive phase, active phase. So a little bit of a discrepancy going 2 weeks out concerning these two models. Let's dig a little deeper. Phase diagrams, just more amplified data from what we were just looking at. Statistic model, dynamic model. But the exact details of where the core of the active phase of the MJO is, right? The MJO, both active and inactive, move from the Indian Ocean, west to east, to the maritime continent, to the West Pacific, to the East Pacific, under the United States, across the Atlantic, over Africa, back to the Indian Ocean. And these two, they're on, one's on one side of the planet, the other one's on the other side. They just rotate around the planet. When the active or inactive phase makes it over the West Pacific, it takes 4 to 6 weeks typically to traverse the Pacific. Right, heavy dot right there is where the active phase is right now. So somewhere between the Indian Ocean and the Maritime Continent, so maybe over the Mentawai Islands, something like that. And these are 3 different projections of where it's supposed to be. Oh, and also, the further the dot is away from the circle, more like out here, the stronger it is. So extremely weak active phase of the MJO, somewhere over the Mentawais, forecast to maybe make it to the West Pacific, but again, extremely weak. That for the statistic model. The dynamic model actually has the active phase completely retrograding over into the far west Indian Ocean and then racing off to the east 2 weeks from now and being over the Maritime Continent, let's say Bali, something like that, or maybe a little bit even east of there 2 weeks from now. But certainly no active phase forecast in the West Pacific. If anything, the inactive phase, well, if this is on one side of the planet, then this would be the other side of the planet. So the inactive phase over the area that we need it to be, the West Pacific, to actually support storm development, at least according to these 2 models. The upper level model, this goes out 40 days, 8 different panels. South America, Central America, right there's Hawaii. 0 is the equator. Dateline roughly right around there. There's New Guinea, the Philippines. All right, so the Kelvin wave generation area right about there. The greens area is favorable for precipitation. One would say the active phase of the MJO. And then there's the inactive phase, not favorable for precipitation. Basically, and then stronger inactive phase over here. So really just a very muddled pattern indeed, with no clear signal until we get into the end of March, and then the inactive phase basically takes over the Pacific, then theoretically followed by the active phase, greens, wet air, the active phase. All right, the CFS model goes out a month here, but also has, 2 months of previous activity. Same thing, whole planet on one chart, dateline runs right up the middle. The blues are easterly anomalies, the reds are westerly anomalies. The solid contours here is the active phase of the MJO. So Kelvin wave generation area from 135 east to 170 west, right in there. And you can just take that right on up the chart. So active phase back in December and early January. Then everything sort of fell apart. You see the blues starting to build. Oh, yeah, and the reds are westerly anomalies. So this was classic active phase sort of activity. We got a Kelvin wave out of that. And now you see blues building. No clear inactive phase. There's the inactive phase over the Maritime Continent, supposedly today. But blues, easterly anomalies over the Kelvin wave generation area, and holding for basically the whole next part of the month, at least into the early part of April, then maybe starting to fade. So no real hope for anything good on that model. So when in doubt, let's look further out. All right, CFS model going out 3 months. Past performance is the bottom, and the forecast is the top. Yellows and oranges are westerly anomalies. Blues are easterly anomalies. There's the date line going right up the middle. All right. Now, there's a little bit of hope here. This model has been continually optimistic, at least in some forms, though right now, okay, let's get ourselves Kelvin wave generation area, 135 east, so starting about there to about there, and we're looking in like right up here to here. And we see blues, strong easterly anomalies. I would say this is the inactive phase of the MJO. But then as we get to the end of March, it looks like the active phase of the MJO takes over the Pacific with westerly anomalies. And after that, no sign of easterly anomalies except directly over California. Though this model has been sort of holding out, suggesting this is going to come, and it was supposed to start in February. I think it was maybe mid-February. Now it's, well, then it was mid-March, and now it's the end of March, so kind of hard to believe this completely. Let's overlay what's going on. All right, dotted contour is the inactive phase of the MJO. It's supposedly moving out, lingering easterly anomalies into about March 22nd, but the active phase is solid contour, building over the West Pacific, and then taking over the Pacific into about the 1st of May. But you notice westerly anomalies not really getting a foothold over the Kelvin wave generation area until into April at the earliest. And then when the inactive phase sets up, westerly anomalies continue. It's like down at the surface, the active-inactive thing is doing one thing, but the winds lag behind the actual contours, if that's possible. I mean, that's what it seems like is happening, because supposedly we're in the active phase right now, but we still have this persistent easterly anomaly thing going on associated with the previous inactive phase. So we'll see. Okay, low pass filter. Maybe this explains a little bit of it. All right, the dotted contour is a high pressure bias. Think of it like the inactive phase, but running much longer. The solid contour is the low pressure bias. Think of it like a long running active phase, the La Niña El Niño indicator. Now clearly, with high pressure bias in control over the dateline, it's no surprise we've had this persistent easterly wind pattern, stronger than normal trades. And then what this suggests is, and the model's been teasing about this for a while, that slowly this high pressure bias is going to move east to almost the dateline or beyond that as the low pressure bias moves deeper into the Kelvin wave generation area. And so it would not be surprising that westerly anomalies would become more prevalent as the low pressure bias moves into the West Pacific. The real question here is, will the low pressure bias actually move into the West Pacific? The model's been teasing at it, and then every time you get closer to it, it doesn't quite get there, and it doesn't quite get there. I mean, you do see over the past 3 months, there has definitely been some movement eastward of it, but it seems like it's moving slower than what the model wants to say. You know, the projection is one thing, the reality of what's actually happening at the surface is a whole different thing right now, and this model seems to be a bit aggressive and a little bit projecting it moving quicker than it really is. All right, so enough MJO discussion. Let's go talk El Niño, La Niña. We're looking for signs of El Niño or Kelvin waves or anything other than La Niña. So we start by looking what's going on down in the ocean. Down 100 meters, 200 meters, 300 meters. Really, it's about 150 meters. We're looking for signs of Kelvin waves moving from west to east, driven by the active phase of the MJO. All right, East Pacific here, West Pacific here. This is data from the TAO buoy array, that same series of buoys strung across the equator used for monitoring El Niño. You can see little X's there, little X's there. These are the anchor lines on the buoys themselves, and they have sensors strung down the anchor line, temperature sensors, gathering temperature data. You beam it all up to a central processing facility, use a model to fill in the gaps. Notice there's a anchor line missing here. One of the buoys is out, or multiple buoys are out. And the same thing over here in the far West Pacific, but you get sort of a sense of what's going on. The 29 degree isotherm, warm water, 29 degrees centigrade, it was back, I think, at 165 east last week, so it's making a little eastward progress, suggesting a little bit of warm water moving this way. The 28 degree isotherm, it was back at 176, I think, last week. It's moved a degree or two, so maybe a little bit of eastward movement. 24 degree isotherm, still, just like last week, pushing the whole way into Ecuador. So we're not locked in a cold water regime here in the east, not like we were this winter where the 24 degree isotherm made it to 140 and not 1 inch beyond that all winter. So we have had a Kelvin wave. It has pushed across the Pacific. We're looking for more of that, but without an active phase of the MJO and westerly anomalies to drive it, we don't think that's going to happen. But it is not the means or the actual temperatures, it's the anomalies, differences from normal for this time of year. So we have warm water, 2 degrees centigrade, making it to about, what is that right there? That is 140 west. So every 2 days, I update the Pacific, the long, wordy, impenetrable block of text data, but I use that to track, like, where's the leading edge of this warm thing, and how does it change every 2 days? Are we getting any movement? Looking for signs of Kelvin waves or the active phase of the MJO or whatever it is. So we have a Kelvin wave here pushing into Ecuador, but there's this little gap in between. I mean, one of the line of sensors are out here. We're not sure how much of a really the gap is there, but there is this little bit of cool water. Typically during the inactive phase of the MJO or just after the active phase and you get a Kelvin wave pushing in, you get a little bit of cool water. So this is not anything to be concerned about for the moment. Let's go look at another model. Here's another one. Same raw data, different model, warm water, trying to make it to the east, but it also shows that cool pool right at 140 west. And then here's the previous Kelvin wave trying to make its way into Ecuador. Sea level anomalies. This is satellite-based data. This is not temperatures. This is the height of the ocean surface. Strip out the waves, strip out the wind waves, strip out even the tide. Is the sphere of the ocean higher or lower than normal? And so here's the equator. There's the date line. Kind of hard to see, but this is like Chile, South America. Ecuador there. Central America, Yucatan, Baja, Hawaii right there. Philippines right there. What we see is positive anomalies. So warm water at depth expands. That'll create a bump on the ocean surface. Cold water at depth contracts, and that'll create a divot on the ocean surface. But what we have right now, and it's actually pretty good news, is, yeah, we have warm water here in the West Pacific, but we have this basically a neutral pattern going the whole way across the Pacific. And it's only on the equator, 5 degrees north and south. That's all that matters. Then you have these pockets of 5 centimeter anomalies, 0 to 5 centimeters, suggesting warming or, warm water at depth, making it in to Ecuador. We know there's a Kelvin wave impacting here. We saw it on the previous charts. So this just corroborates what we saw previously. Upper ocean heat anomalies, the upper 300 meters of the ocean surface. West Pacific here, East Pacific here. Go back in time. Last year, March, Kelvin wave made it across the Pacific. Warm water, the reds and yellows, warm, pushing across, driven by the active phase of the MJO. Another active phase, pushing across. We thought this maybe was going to just shut down La Niña completely. Got pretty excited there. Another one in the May-June time frame, and then it all fell apart. Cold water reemerged. This is and basically 1, 2, 3 pulses of cold water. We'll say it, cold water Kelvin waves, I think it's called the upwelling phase of the Kelvin wave cycle. These are downwelling Kelvin waves, warm. And then we had active phase of the MJO in December. We saw that previously, has created the Kelvin wave we were just looking at. It's making it to about 93 west, so almost across the Pacific. Here's that little cool pool we just saw, upwelling phase of the Kelvin wave cycle. And you can kind of see it, warm. Things cool down a little bit, warm. Things cool down a little bit, warm again. So that's what we're seeing here. The question is there going to be another Kelvin wave? Well, looking at the you got to have an MJO active phase to drive that. We're not really seeing anything for at least another month. Probably not. The question is, will La Niña reemerge yet again? That's what we're digging for and trying to figure out now. But before we make that leap, what's going on at the ocean surface? All right, sea surface temperature anomalies. We know what's going on underneath, but it is that interface between the ocean and the atmosphere. Those ocean surface temperatures drive the atmosphere directly above it. If the ocean's colder than normal, you don't get evaporation. That sets up high pressure, and then broad, persistent high pressure sets up at least the inactive phase of the MJO, if not La Niña, which is pretty much where we're at. So, South America here, that's Chile, and Peru. Central America, Hawaii there, the equator right there. So we have a obvious ball of cold water here. This is the La Niña cool pool. But the good news is water that was much colder than normal for all winter long, right in this area here. It's much, much better than it was. And if anything, we're getting some incursion of warmer than normal water. It's not a lot, but even just a drop is a good thing, suggesting that La Niña is fading. Yes, we have upwelling along the immediate coast of Peru, but this happens all the time. It makes it just a little bit off the coast, doesn't even make it to the Galapagos, and just fades. We also have some warming along Chile here and all around here. So this is the periphery of the cool pool here, with lesser cool waters around it. And they've been persistently, especially out in here, that the coolest waters are losing their coolness and slowly warming up. In fact, here's the trend for the past 7 days. Yellows and oranges are warming water temperatures. So there's Chile, Peru, Central America, you get it. And it's just on the equator right here that matters. But we see warming off of Ecuador, over the Galapagos, the whole way out to about 130 west. That's a pretty good area, and this has been doing like this for about a week now. Otherwise, it's pretty much neutral. And it's only 5 degrees north and south of the equator, so that'd be just like right there to right there. But the warming is happening right where we want it. The question is, how long will it continue to warm, and how much traction will that make? Will it get caught? Will this warming trend get caught by the trades and push even further off to the west? Too early to know, but we're watching for it. And the backed off view here, again, large extent of cool waters. We're not saying we're anywhere near being out of La Niña, but the core of cool La Niña temperatures are slowly fading. We're getting some hints of warming here and there. We just need a lot more of it for a lot longer period of time. And one more little piece of data, the Niño 1.2 region. They break the whole equatorial Pacific into regions, but Niño 1.2 is this area right here over the Galapagos, off of Ecuador, a little bit of Peru. Okay, kind of a noisy area, but it's good to watch it because when Kelvin waves impact here, this is the first area that warms up. And then the Niño 3.4 region starts at 1, so there's California, 120 west, 5 degrees north and south of the equator, out to 170 west right here. You can see clearly water temperatures are cooler, but you also have the trades blowing. And if your cool pool was here, and it's all working its way to the surface and fading. We look down in the oceans, down at depth, and we see not a whole lot of cool waters. We think what's happening is the cool water that was here is getting pushed off to the east by the trades. So in the Niño 3.4 region, the official El Niño monitoring region, temperatures are actually cooling, but we think that's more just a sign of the last blast of La Niña getting squeezed to the surface by that Kelvin wave and traveling across the Pacific before it finally fades. So let's go look at some temperatures. The Niño 1.2 index. Sea surface temperatures clearly on the way up, 490 thousandths of a degree, less than half a degree below normal. The first time in, I don't know, quite a while, we'll say a year at least, since it's been above the the La Niña threshold, which is a half a degree below normal for 5 consecutive 3-month periods. Now, 1 day of data is not a trend, but we looked at all the other data and it looks like, well, this might at least hold on for a while. That's good news, but this isn't the official El Niño monitoring region. This is the Niño 3.4 region. Temperatures, you can clearly see it, are falling, if anything, down 978 thousandths, so let's say a degree below normal. But again, we think a lot of this is the last of the La Niña cool water getting squeezed to the surface by that Kelvin wave, getting caught by the trades, blowing off to the west into this region, the Niño 3.4 region. So, of course, it would be normal to expect that temperatures would fall some. Now, the question is, where are temperatures going to go from here? That is something that is very much up in the air. Before we go there, though, one more bit of data. What is the atmosphere doing in response to the sea surface temperatures? We know they're cold, so it would not be unexpected to see the atmosphere responding in a La Niña-like way. But can we measure that? Yes, by the Southern Oscillation Index. Difference in pressure between Darwin, Australia, and Tahiti. Darwin basically over the Indian Ocean, Tahiti clearly over the Pacific. When pressures are lower at Tahiti, the index goes negative. When pressures are higher in Tahiti, like La Niña-ish, then the index goes positive. Today's value, positive 22.35. And scanning down here for the past month, we've had just a couple little smattering of negative numbers, but basically positive data. This is noisy data, though. 30-day average, 8.10. Okay, last year, during the peak of La Niña, I think this was in the end of January, this got up to plus 19. We haven't been anywhere near that. We got to 10.6 or something like that. And We're rising a little bit now compared to where we were, but not much. We're hanging about 8. The 90-day average, the El Niño La Niña indicator, today at 7.96. This was up to 15 a year ago. We got nowhere close to that. We got into the 9s or something like that. And falling a little bit, though up from the past couple of days. But still, it's still La Niña, but it isn't anywhere near like La Niña was a year ago. 30-day moving SOI just graphed out just so you can see it back January 2020. We were, we'll say, neutral to weekly La Niña negatives. Remember, negatives are El Niño. So neutral El Niño. Then we got July 2020. The SOI moved clearly positive. These are the active phases of the MJO. This is the inactive phase. Clearly, the active phase of the MJO was dominating. We got to a plus 20 reading in early January 2021. Last summer, things fell. We thought maybe we were out of it, and then here came the building trend again. We got up to, this says about 14 or something like that. Now we're dropping somewhere in the 9s, something like that. The question is, where are we going to be? The CFS model, official, well, not official, but it's forecast for temperatures in the Niño 3.4 region, sea surface temperature anomalies, saying we're as warm as we're going to get, and from here we crash with temperatures going down to a degree and a half below normal, and then sort of maybe rising to a minus 1.3 degrees as we get into next fall. But this version of the model has some issues. They issue the PDF corrected version, but it's still not a whole lot better. Saying temperatures going down to about minus 1.35 degrees, and then hovering as we get in July about a degree, 1.1 degrees below normal. Now, this model, and there's one other model that paint this kind of doom and gloom La Niña forecast. All the other models, and there's like 30 models, they're all saying, no, we should be in neutral territory as we get into the summer. So the question is, what's really going to happen? And we'll just say, we don't know. We don't have a clue. But let's go take a look just a little at a long-term picture. The Pacific Decadal Oscillation. So we have a short-term oscillation like the inactive and the active phase of the MJO, and they go for 4 to 6 weeks over the Pacific. Then you have your El Niño La Niña thing, which is, some say anywhere from every 2 to 3 year oscillation to up to 7 years, maybe a 5-year average. And then there's the Pacific Decadal Oscillation. All these, they kind of go warm and cold. The active phase of the MJO is warm. The inactive phase is cold. El Niño is warm. La Niña is cold. Pacific Decadal Oscillation runs in 20 to 30 year cycles. So it's an oscillation embedded in an oscillation. So the inactive phase of the MJO embedded in the La Niña phase of the ENSO cycle, embedded in the cool phase of the Pacific Decadal Oscillation. So just right now, here we are. The blues are the cold phase, and it's not as obvious, it's not real clear because we warmed up a little bit. But if you look at this long arc here from, this is February of 98, the last major El Niño, it just like the Earth vented all kinds of heat out. El Niños are ways for the Earth to try to vent off heat, and a lot of heat got vented. And then ever since then, since 98, so we're talking 22, 23 years, something like that. 24 years. We've been basically in the cool phase. We had what was a supposed super El Niño in 2014, 2015, 2016, but then we just fell right back into cool. And then we had some minor El Niño activity in the 2003, 2004 range. But now let's go back and see what, here we go. Let's see if this will work. Oops, we went a little bit too far. Okay. There we go. So this is, whoops, it keeps doing this to me. Okay, let's see if we can get that. There we go. All right, 98. You can see prior to that, things were quite warm, and they were warm. See if we can get this to work. to 70. There we go. 75. So this is the warm phase of the PDO from 75 to 98. So 22 years. And then the cool phase took over after that, and we've been in it ever since. We were thinking this El Nino here might actually push us into the warm phase of the PDO, but clearly that is not the case. But we're also thinking that if you get cold enough, long enough, I mean, if you look at, let's do one thing here. You look at this chart here, warmer than normal temperatures in the North Atlantic, in the South Atlantic, in the West Pacific, the whole Indian Ocean. Okay, and NOAA is constantly updating every 30 years what is considered normal. Well, the oceans keep getting warmer, so they keep upgrading the minimum threshold for what is warmer, and even that, it keeps getting warmer. So there's a lot of, the point being, there's a lot of latent heat energy in the oceans. So at some point, this cool phase that we're in, we're thinking is going to, the heat is going to push us back into a warm phase. The Earth is going to have to vent off that heat to some degree. Now, others say La Niña is actually the Earth's way of cooling itself when there is excessive heat, and I would agree with that. But I also say that is a bit of a reaction. It's an overcorrection to a La Niña event, especially 20 years of La Niña, of El Nino. Then you go into this long La Niña-like state as the Earth tries to reestablish equilibrium. And then what happens is, well, then it overcorrects, and then you fall back into a warm phase. But are we at the cusp of going into that warm phase? I don't know. I'll just be honest. Don't know. Don't know where we're going. I don't think anyone can definitively say. But clearly the oceans are warm. Clearly we are in a cold phase. Clearly there is some correction that needs to happen. But the question is when? We don't know. All right, for right now, there's a little swell hitting, a bunch of wind swell too, and it looks like there's going to be a lot more wind swell. It's springtime. Hey, it always happens. In springtime during La Niña, high pressure is stronger than normal, and so the north winds in California are stronger than normal. Typically, you'd expect the trades in Hawaii to be stronger than normal too, but at least for now, it's not so bad there. California's taking the brunt of it. There are a couple of more storms forecast. We'll see what happens, especially midweek as we get, closer. Then we'll have a better handle on whether there's two small systems forecast to push north of Hawaii towards California. Maybe we'll get some surf out of it. And it looks like the winds are supposed to at least back off a little bit. As low pressure cuts into that high, it's going to take some of the energy out of it. That'll cut the winds down. Maybe we'll get some rideable waves. And there's also supposed to be potentially some rain, if you believe it. We're hoping. We are hoping. We'll know a lot better. Well, by next Sunday when we do this video, it'll be snowing or raining or whatever. So we'll see. And beyond that, well, the jury is definitely out. We know we're going to suffer for La Niña for at least, another couple of months. But is it going to die? And do we go to a neutral pattern, as some models suggest? Or do we stay in this perpetual La Niña state for yet another year? Too early to know. We're about ready to move into the spring unpredictability barrier. I don't think we'll know anything for sure until we get into the June time frame, and then we'll see. But keep your fingers crossed. Hope for the best. All right? Thank you for watching. We'll do this again next week. Same time, same channel, unless the snow's really good, and then maybe we will blow out. But I'm expecting we'll probably be here. All right? Have a good one. See you next week.